Hi, it's me, Ingrid INFP. And wow, I had an eventful week where I'm working 12 days in a row because I'm working Saturday and Sunday. When I'm filming this video is a Saturday. Um, it was a storm outside, and the bus just never came, so I had to walk a half hour in the rain, and it was stormy, so I couldn't even have my umbrella. So I'm trying to like dry myself and um, kind of take it easy because I'm running low on sleep and I need to relax. But I wanted to talk about certain things that have happened, and then I want to go over to our topic of the day, which is about HSPs and MBTI and autism. So it's going to be a lot, but I want to first say that the reason I'm making this video is because my ISFJ best friend has been reading some books, and I was telling him about all the books that I've been reading, and I basically talked to him nonstop for like 6 hours, and last weekend, and he was just listening to everything, and he's an awesome friend. But yeah, I saw on his table that he had 2 books, and one of the books was about HSPs, and I was like, why are you reading that? And he's like, yeah, I really relate. And like, my first thought was HSPs don't exist, and most HSPs are autistic. That's my first thought. But I realized, okay, well, I mean, there must be some reason why he's relating to this and why so many people are relating to it. And he's not autistic, so obviously I must be missing something, so we'll get to that later. But there's that. Another thing is that, so I found out that Sweden is finally repealing a law that is allowing. So basically, it used to be that if you had ADHD or autism, you needed to have a special, like a form signed by your doctor in order to get your driving license, which costs around like $100 just to get that, and also, you have to pay for the visit and everything. And you have to go to a psychiatrist, not a GP doctor. A GP can't write this. So I would have had to wait several months and do all this. But now you don't need to do this anymore because they've noticed that, people with ADHD and autism, if they can pass the driving test, then why should they have to have more tests done on them, So I'm happy about that. Another thing is that for those of you who have been on this channel for a while, maybe you remember when I took the IDI testing during my leadership course a year ago, or not a year ago, it must be in January 2025. And where I got that I was a sensory, like processor was the name of the personality that I got. And I had to fill out this form for my ESFP colleague. And it was funny because, it was like a quadrant, and I was in one corner and she was on the extreme opposite corner. So we were like diametrically opposite on the scale. And this is a scale that you fill out yourself, and then other people fill out about you. And I filled it about her, and so I ended up scoring what she thought about herself. So I guess that I'm a pretty good gauge of her character and how she views herself as well. But yeah, so we kind of suspect that the corner of that scale where I was at was more of like the autistic corner, and the corner where she was at is a little bit more of the ADHD corner. And but you can be both, so I don't know how you would be on that scale. So anyway, talking about scales, now we're back to our topic, which is HSP. Highly Sensitive Person by Elaine Aron in the 1990s. She found this was way before, all this autism research about how autism presents in women, which is very close to HSP, but okay. And so I looked at the different scales, like the MBTI. MBTI has different scales, 4 letters, and autism has certain traits. And then I looked at the HSP. So the HSP traits would be overstimulation, sensitive to positive experience, social sensitivity, depth of processing, emotional reactivity, and sensitivity to details. So if you score high on these things through their tests, then that means that you're an HSP. Now, there's a big overlap between these symptoms and autism, especially when it concerns, so there are 6 different scales, especially when it concerns overstimulation, social sensitivity, depth of processing, emotional reactivity, and sensitivity to details. So 4 out of the 6, I think that maybe autistic people would score low on the social sensitivity, but not always. You can be hyper empathetic when you're autistic, and so be socially sensitive in that way. And also sensitivity to positive experience. You can experience autistic joy and experience every kind of emotion stronger, but you might be lower on that scale. If we think of like how a lot of autistic people have alexithymia or are, or don't, are more rational, I guess, and realistic. So a bit less prone to being optimistic overall. But I don't think that's what sensitivity to positive experience is really. I think that it's like, autistic joy. So I would say that almost all of the scales tends to score highly by an autistic person. So I'm not saying that every autistic person would be an HSP, but most will. And some of them won't. It's not completely overlapping, but like some autistic people who have a lot of alexithymia and have trouble with social cues would probably not end up being an HSP, And that's where MBTI comes in, where I think that the people who are HSPs, I would say that I've narrowed it down to a few of the types. So I would say that people who identify as HSP, or not identify, that would be considered an HSP by Elaine Aron, would probably be more likely to be a feeler in the MBTI, and more likely to be either an NF or an ISFP or an ISFJ. So I would say that it would be the IF, the introvert and feeling types. So it's kind of like that, except that I would say that there is the ENFJs would probably be an HSP as well. So the only extrovert type that I would put in there would be the ENFJ. And the only sensor types I would put in there would be ISFP and ISFJ. So the only one, and the only introverted feeling ones that I would put in there would be INFP and ISFP. And which one would I also have? I would also have the INFJ in there, obviously, because they have NI and FE, So it would be INFP, INFJ, ISFP, ISFJ, and ENFJ. the 5 types. And that, funnily enough, according to Elaine Aron, 15 to 20% of the population would be a highly sensitive person. And if you look at 5 different types, and if each of these types has between 2 and 6%, you would get approximately to 15 to 20% with 5 types. So that, I'm not making like any hard science numbers here, but I think that this makes sense to me. And the reason I'm looking into this is also because, several people have said to me that they consider themselves highly sensitive people. And all of them are within these types. I'm the only one that happens to be autistic, but I would say, so I have 2 ENFJs that consider themselves HSP. One person who considers herself an INFJ, but I think that she's an ISFJ. And my ISFJ friend. And an INFP that I know from online. So I know 5 people who consider themselves HSP, and I don't consider myself HSP because I don't really believe in the utility of the concept as a person who is autistic and INFP. I feel like that corresponds to me and I don't need to use the HSP label. But I can see why these people that I've talked to relate to HSP label because, well, as far as I know, only the INFP has been diagnosed with autism. And me, I guess I count as an INFP who thought I was an HSP until I got the autism diagnosis. But the other 4 people, they were all FE users, They were all either ISFJ or ENFJ. And I think that they feel like they are truly like special people that have a huge social sensitivity, as opposed to autistic people, I guess, that don't have as much of that. So I guess that on the scales, you can score more on certain of the scales and less on certain of the scales, but still be considered an HSP. So I would say that these people are sensitive to stimuli, sensitive to people, very empathetic people, and are deep in their processing of emotion and have a lot of deep emotions, sensitive to details, sensitive to positive experience, and so sensitive to overstimulation and, stress and that kind of thing. So I would say that their assessment of themselves is right in that they are high on those scales that are, by definition, the HSP definition. But so I guess that there are different flavors of HSP, that there are the autistic HSPs and the non-autistic HSPs. And within the non-autistic HSPs, would we consider them neurodivergent because they are HSP? I don't know. And it's like, there's also sensory processing disorder, which is the whole other thing, which is basically, like having half of the autism diagnosis criteria, pretty much. So I don't know where people are on all of these scales and such. It's just I found it interesting that my ISFJ friend considers himself an HSP now. Like he's just discovered the concept. Like I knew of this concept. It was before I found out about MBTI, basically. So I must have been like around 14 when I found out about HSP, and I really related to HSP before I related to INFP, before I related to, autism way later. So when I was HSP, or when I thought I was HSP, I thought I was an INFJ, because I thought that I had such a resonance with other people. Now it ends up that I am using my FINE and not an IFE, and I'm also using, and also I have the empathy, but autism doesn't mean that you don't have empathy. Some people with autism can be hyper empathetic. So it ends up like a lot of those deep connections that I form with people is due to the deep processing of autism. So everything goes into each other. So I'm not going to say that HSP doesn't exist anymore. Like I think that it probably is a useful term for certain people to use. I just find that it doesn't help me at all at the moment. But if it helps my ISFJ friend and my ENFJ friend and the other ENFJ and the other ISFJ slash INFJ, we don't know, and my INFP friend, if it helps them, then I'll, I guess, like, what am I to say? But I find that a huge amount of the people who consider themselves HSP online, before the autism craze, before the autism became so much more talked about online, people were identifying as HSP. So this was around like 10-15 years ago. Everybody was saying that they were HSP. And I think that that autism is a more useful term, I think that HSP is too unspecific, and also it kind of implies a certain sense of moral superiority compared to like the non. There is that about autism, the Aspie supremacy kind of, like, we're the next evolution of human or whatever. There is that kind of feeling within certain parts of the autism community as well. But I think that in the HSP community, it's kind of like the dark empath kind of stuff that is kind of dangerous and manipulative. It's like, oh, I'm so much better than you because I have so much empathy and I am so sensitive that I can't possibly be morally wrong about anything because I am a much better, more good person than everybody else. Nobody else has any heart, And I kind of see that in the FE users, especially that consider themselves HSP. It's like, oh, I am such a magnanimous person and everybody is stepping on my feet and they keep using me as a doormat. But that's because I'm sensitive. So it makes sense, It's like, you're not morally good because you're sacrificing yourself all the time. Being good is about other things, and it's about other things as well than just the empathy part. You can feel things or you can not feel things, and it's the behavior that comes afterwards. I've done videos about, is empathy even important, in terms of how kind a person is. Sure, it can be really useful to be empathetic. It can be good for rapport and for connection with other people and for love and fostering each other's connections and growth. But that's not the way to judge if a person is good or not. You know, it's not, empathy is not a moral imperative in order to, but this is just my value system, the way that I see things. I find that the HSP idea kind of goes over to this moral superiority thing of like, oh, I'm so empathetic and therefore I can't do anything bad, you know. So that's why I tend to be a little bit careful about, you know, using that term in any sense. But so, yeah, anyway, I thought it was interesting that my friend was reading about HSP. He offered for me to read a book. I'm not interested. There's so much pop psychology out there, and I know that MBTI is kind of pop psychology, but it's kind of like it's a system that I know and that I find useful. And if I don't find HSP useful, then it's like not really of a thing I want to keep going into. I find that for me, HSP was a thing that I thought of in my past, and that was me age 15, 15 years ago. I had interest in that kind of thing, which I really don't have an interest in right now. So that's what I'm going to say about that for the moment. Tell me what you guys think. Do you believe HSPs exist? Do you believe that there are certain types that are more likely or less likely to be HSP? What do you think about the connection between autism and HSP? I'd be happy to hear. I mean, I'm not like firmly into any camp of like what goes into what. This is just my theory, is that these are the types that are most likely to be HSP, and that autistic people are most likely HSP, or HSPs are most likely to be autistic. So have a great day, everybody. Bye.